Hey guys, Eric Bischoff here. Now, if you need cash without the controversy, the team at Savewithconrad.com can help. But don't take my word for it.
Hi, my name is Richard Smith. I'm from Moss Point, Mississippi. One of my friends at work said I just been refinancing and my interest rate was 9%, and he said he got his for 2.3. So I said, well, maybe I should try. Got a hold of Diane. She kept in touch the whole entire time. We owned 2 houses, and we rented one out, and my renter quit paying, so we gave it back to the mortgage company. And because we did that, we had to wait 3 years for an FHA loan to go back through. The one thing that Conrad said on his podcast was, we'll never tell you no. We might say, not now, this is what we need to do, and we'll make sure we get it done. Well, prime example, 3 years. And when they say no money out of pocket, there's no money out of pocket. They figure it out. But like, she was so quick that, don't worry about this, I got this first. That's what impressed me the most. My name is Richard Smith, and I saved $700 a month with SavewithConrad.com.
And unlike the dirt sheets, these reviews don't lie. With over 1,000 5-star reviews, find out for yourself how much Conrad and his team can save you by checking out SavewithConrad.com and do it today.
NMLS number 32416, equal housing lender, SavewithConrad.com.
Words are about to be spoken on the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, presented to you by the ad-free shows and podcast networks. I'm John Alba. That's the broken one, the woken one, the spoken one himself, Mr. Matt Hardy. What's going on, my man? Another week at the Hardy compound, it appears.
Oh my God, I love being at the Hardy compound. Another week of very hard training. This Friday, whenever this drops, this day, I'll be facing the system that evening, myself and the Ball of Speed, Mike Bailey, along with Trent the 7th. We will be taking on the system, and I got to tell you, man, it is not going to be a good night for system, and I am targeting Moose in this match specifically because my game plan is to get Moose on a one-on-one, and I want to win the TNA World Heavyweight title once again.
Yeah, and I think that you've been shot right to the top of that picture. You know, it didn't help that Nick Nemeth got taken out. Pretty vicious assault there. But you know, Nick Nemeth, he's still a great story. You know, coming off that amazing WWE tenure and now trying to become the guy over in TNA. What do you think that he adds to TNA as an organization?
I think Nick Nemeth adds something to wherever he goes. First and foremost, this is kind of his first dance, really, with being outside of Alexandria. If you listen to the podcast, you know what that term means. Alexandria means you're in a comfort zone, like the WWE or like you're with AEW, and you're going stepping outside of the walls of safety and security, and you're really making your own journey. You're out there with the walkers, you're out there with the zombies, you're having to fight for everything you get, you know. But there is a great life to be met out there if you work hard and you bust your ass, especially if you have the TV time, you know, of a WWE behind you. And Nick has obviously had that. He was there for 18, 19 years. And the fact that he's doing some New Japan stuff, he's doing TNA, he's doing some indie stuff, he's doing AAA in Mexico. That's what it was, right? AAA. And he's doing great. He's killing it. Actually, last Sunday, I was at the EML show where he wrestled and he returned to team with his old tag team partner, Brad Attitude, who's a North Carolina local, a guy I've known forever. They were in NXT together, and they headlined the event as a tag team. You know, it was the return of Nick Nemeth and Brad Attitude as a tag team. They took on a couple of AML's top guys there, and they had a hell of a house, man. They had over 1,100 people in that venue that night, and it was great. I was there signing autographs and meeting and greeting, and did a little shot right at the beginning of the show. Someone had to suffer a very deserved twist of fate, but it was a good night all in all. And man, I love to see Nick doing this. He seems very happy. He seems kind of at peace, and he's willing to hustle. He's willing to bust his ass and hustle, and that's what it's all about if you are outside the walls of an Alexandria.
People looked at him for so long as the next coming of Mr. Perfect, the next coming of Shawn Michaels, and he achieved a lot of success in WWE. I don't want to take anything away from him, but it always kind of felt like while everyone knew he could have been here, he only really got to here. Why do you think that was?
I don't know. I mean, he had a great run. I mean, there's no denying it. When you look, like, I know a lot of people thinking those analytics about, like, why was the guy not on top the whole while, this, that, and the other thing. Like, the real analytics, if you're in the business, is how long you have as a run and the kind of money you make. And he made great money there for 19 years. And those are the top analytics. But I feel like maybe he could have been more of a tippy top guy if he'd had someone that was totally in his corner. Maybe size is an issue. He's a smaller guy, but he's in great shape. He's a great athlete. That could be something that could have hindered him, especially during the Vince era, right? Vince likes bigger guys, in general. I think everybody knows that historically. But he's super talented in the ring. He's super smooth. Once again, I say this to this day, and I might actually change my Matt fact tonight and make this a Matt fact as well. But Nick Nemeth took the best side effect that I've ever given. Like, I loved working with him on the road and house shows because he always took the best side effect. He would take the side effect and go like high angle, like land on his upper back and shoulders, and then he would spin and see if he could do a 360. A lot of times he would get 180, but sometimes he could spin all the way around on his shoulders. It was so unique, but so cool.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes him so special. I think many people would look at Nick Nemeth, Dolph Ziggler, and say, this guy's a top 5 seller in WWE history. I mean, when you have someone who's willing to give that much to your move, what does that do for you as a performer?
I mean, it's appreciated first and foremost, and it's something that you're grateful for when you're working with someone that is going to bust their ass to work harder for you to make your stuff look better. And that's I think that's the key to being a good wrestler in this day and age as well. That's what you want to do too. You want to make your opponent look good. Your opponent wants you to look good. That's should be the mindset. That means everybody's working for the greater good of the match at the end of the day. So I think he is truly an example, which I can relate back to my brother, Jeff Hardy. I think Nick Nemeth, I think he shines when he sells. He really, really does. He would sell so well and so uniquely, and he would take such unique bumps. They would make him stand out. And I think whenever he's in the role of a babyface, you want to see him come back even more once he gets beat up so badly.
Yeah, and on top of that, he got a name like Dolph Ziggler over, which could have been DOA, and yet he managed to become a WWE Hall of Famer.
I don't know. It may have been better than the caddy, when he started off with
Kerwin White.
Kerwin White, yes. And he was the caddy. And I think I nailed him at some point early in that day. I was doing something in some sort of match or whatever. And I think I hit him with a big potato, a crouton punch, but it is what it is.
Maybe the Lake of Reincarnation could bring back Kerwin White. Who's to say?
Who knows? It could bring back anybody. It could bring back the caddy. It could bring back Kerwin White. Could bring back anybody, virtually anybody.
Yeah, man, Chavo doing Kerwin White and him as the caddy. Boy, what a period of time that was, huh?
One thing I gotta say, man, kudos to Chavo because he went all in on the deal. Like he didn't hold back. He was all in. He's like, okay, well, this is pro wrestling. My family's done it. The promoter wants you to do something. You roll with the punches. You do it, and he did. He was all committed to it.
Can you imagine taking the Guerrero name away from a performer?
That's funny. Well, I'm glad you just said that now. It led me to a great story. I can, because the reason they did that is because they thought he was going to get cheered just because he was Guerrero.
No, I get it.
That's why. So let me tell you this. When I split from Jeff, Paul Heyman had an idea to take away the Hardy name from me that he had pitched to me. He said, just because, it gets cheered. It just elicits a reaction. And he was talking about different crazy names we could pick. He said, just like, I want to get rid of this heritage because I'm so embarrassed about whatever, and my name's going to be this, and no longer Matt Hardy. And I'm going, I would rather stick with my name. It's my real name. I own it. So if I build something, I want to be able to own this. So thank you. We'll stick with Matt Hardy. I'm cool with that. I'd been around long enough at that point. I knew to stick to my guns on that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you could always change your first name. That's what the Bucks did. And they're Matthew and Nicholas now. I mean, it's their real names, but going by that as their gimmick name is something. Yeah, all right, Matt, let's talk about it. We got to talk about it. Tony Khan got beat up by the Elite. It was a pretty big deal. It was the talk of the town. He went on the NFL draft, selling his neck with the neck brace. It was. I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but I want to hear your thoughts on it. As throughout Dynamite last week, they played up that there's going to be a big confrontation between Jack Perry and Tony Khan in the ring. And that led to Jack Perry punching him in the gut, and eventually the Elite giving him a TK driver, formerly the Meltzer driver.
Right.
What did you think of the angle?
I got to tell you, I would love to hear your thoughts first.
Oh, you want to hear my thoughts first?
Please. I would love to hear your thoughts.
Okay. I thought, number one, I'll say this. I thought it was extremely entertaining. I thought it was very entertaining. I thought it was great how over the course of the show, they laid the seeds for it. I've talked about this in the past with you. Whenever you have an A story to follow throughout the course of a show, I always think it makes for a more cohesive show. And that was an angle that they followed throughout the night and paid off in the main event. So I'm always about that. Jack Perry's really good at this character. It's going to get over pretty big. I feel pretty confident in that.
It's gonna be huge.
And I think that he's leaning into all the right elements. I absolutely think that little smirk is an allusion to the Punk GIF, the famous Punk GIF, where Punk does the little smirk into the camera. I totally think it's playing off that. It's good stuff. I thought the Elite were fantastic in this segment. They're really, really good at slowly unraveling the layers of the onion. And like when you thought that the Elite or the Bucks rather, were going to hit him with the EVP trigger, and then Okada's like, no, let's get him up. And then eventually that leads to the TK. I thought that was all really well done. I'll say this about Tony and his selling, which a lot of people were very critical of. Regardless of what you think about how he sold in that moment, that was probably the greatest moment in Tony Khan's life. I think Tony Khan has waited all 40 years of his life for that moment to have a chance to be part of that wrestling angle. And for Shad Khan to come out at the end, by the way, Shad Khan, undoubtedly, I did the math, undoubtedly the richest man who's ever appeared on a pro wrestling television show. It was definitely something that I will say, no matter what, Matt, you couldn't look away. And they at least paid off putting the TV footage, the hidden cam footage on TV. At least they made sense of that. What would you say?
I agree with all that. It did help make sense of using the footage. It bettered that argument, I think, of using the footage, because just kind of in its own. And one thing my wife said, she wished there had been commentary over it, as opposed to just kind of like quiet still footage, and they could have almost like described it more, which could have put it more in the in the Jack Perry narrative. Make actually take his side of the argument. That
if the Bucks talked about him being a victim in the moment.
Of course, yeah, and put that over the video, and I agree with that. And that was from my wife Rebecca, and she's pretty good at some of these things. But the fact is, they did that. It's kind of been building, and whenever they did the deal where Jack hit him with the mic, and he dropped, and then the Bucks were like helping him up, and they just like kind of accidentally got into that position for like the EVP trigger. That was that was fantastic. And then the Okada thing, subtly, no, pick him up. And they did the thing and they dropped Tony. People can complain about a selling. That's their right. They can. But do you remember the first stunner Vince McMahon ever took?
I said that every single time I saw someone talking about how bad Tony's selling was. I'm like, does anyone remember Vince's first stunner? Oh my God, it was horrible.
And it's just, but it is what it is. And you know what? I'm okay with this, because Tony Khan is not a fucking trained professional wrestler.
He's not.
It is what it is. And neither was Vince. Like, if they did it and something, it went awry, whatever, you get the intent behind it. You get the whole idea behind it. And I love the fact that Tony finally embraced that he was a critical part of the show. He's always said, like, no, I don't want to be a character. I want to be straightforward. I'm just here to promote wrestling. That's fine. Tony Khan is a character in the AEW universe. He cannot stop that. He cannot change that.
He made himself one. Indirectly, he made himself one.
But between his appearances on TV and his announcements and his tweets more than anything else on social media, that has transitioned him. He is a character on the show, and people feel very strongly about him, either one way or the other. So there's no denying that he's a character on the show, and I'm glad he embraced it. And I'm glad he did this. And I honestly think this is one of the best angles that AEW's ever done. You look the next day, the NFL was talking about it. He got coverage, press all over about this specific angle as he was wearing the neck brace. And I think AEW needs more of that stuff. I love that. I love that. That is what is going to grow the brand. That is what is going to put more people in buildings. That is what is going to put more eyeballs on the product. So I'm a big advocate of that, and I'm a big fan of that.
Yeah, and as far as the selling goes, again, you know my thoughts on this. I've talked about this at length, especially on our kayfabe episode. It's kayfabe dead. Check that out in the archives, extremehardy.com. We all know pro wrestling is fake. We know it's fake. So how well somebody sells, it's a very antiquated thing for me because we know what we're seeing is an illusion. So
Yeah,
Tony
and I,
Khan,
I wouldn't even say fake, John. I would say we know pro wrestling is entertainment.
yeah, well,
You know what I
sorry,
mean?
yes, I know I
Yeah,
used
you
the
know what I
F
mean?
word, but but you know what I mean,
And I mean, it's not bad, but it's also not accurate too. You know, when
right?
people say it's not accurate, it's truly not accurate. I mean, it is
Sure.
entertainment. People are working together, but people like get hurt you
No,
get hurt
no, of
all the
course.
time.
That
You know.
I know that firsthand. I would never downplay that element of it. But I mean, the fake what I'm referring to is like we know that we're seeing a scripted fight here. So when someone is not a great seller, especially someone like Tony Khan, who's not a professional wrestler, I don't know. It doesn't take me out of it. Like, did I laugh? Yeah, I laughed. Was I supposed to laugh? I don't know if I was supposed to laugh, but it was entertaining and it had my attention the entire angle. I couldn't look away. When he came out, Matt, and he looked like Smiley McGee out there, I'm like, oh, dude, this guy's getting dropped today. I'm like, it is happening finally. And I think because he so badly insisted, I'm not going to be a character on the show. I'm not going to do any of that. There was almost a shock value of actually seeing him take a bump,
Sure.
and that added to the layers of it. And now it seems like there's going to be some sort of an angle that's going to lead to a team AEW versus a team Tony Khan or a team authority figure, whoever that is. That seems to be the route it's going to be going here.
It does. And I like it. It's intriguing. This is another thing I can say. So my wife, most people who watch the show probably know who she is, Rebecca Hardy. She was Queen Rebecca when we were doing the whole Broken Matt saga, right? In TNA initially. But she it's a big deal on social media, especially on TikTok, social media influencer. And like her attention span's very short. She's a New Yorker. She's Hispanic. She's from Puerto Rico. She's a Boricua. So she has the blood. And then also being from New York on top of that, she has a very short attention span. So a lot of times when she's doing these TikTok videos, she's anything over 10 seconds is too long. 10 seconds in and out, too long. She actually sat down and watched this. I said, you've got to watch this segment with what happens with Tony because he ends up mixing it up. And when she sat down and started watching the stuff, when he was in there with Jungle Boy, shook the hands and hit Tony, I'd never seen her be so compelled in pro wrestling television. My wife watching it, just as Jack hit Tony, boom, and then the whole thing with the Bucks, how they slowly did that, and they start helping him up and doing this, and it looks like they're going to hit him, but then no, they don't, and then they end up doing it. And she sat there and she watched through that whole thing. She said, "That's the best segment I've ever seen on AEW television." She said, "That's the most compelling and interesting thing I've ever seen on AEW television." Now, I'll say this outright: she doesn't give a shit about wrestling. A 5-star match, she could care less. She won't watch a match for over 10 minutes. You know what I mean? And like, she doesn't care. Good wrestling, I think she loves like the drama and the storyline behind it. If something is interesting, she is looking for an interesting scenario. And there are a lot of people like that. And once again, I actually chalk her up to probably the best example of a casual fan for me, because I can have her watch something and she can say if it interests her or not,
Sure.
because there's stuff that she watches that is like diehard wrestling and she just doesn't care. It means nothing to her. And I think with AEW, I do like the fact that it's an alternative. They are putting out great matches. They're putting out 5-star matches, whatever else. And they have a high quality of wrestling content on their program, right? But there's also the people who want that and relish that. They also get very entitled to that. And sometimes those people are the worst when it comes to feedback. If you're giving them entertainment, at the end of the day, pro wrestling is entertainment, and you need that to continue to grow your audience. And you have to be very careful about catering to the people that demand 5-star matches, 5-star matches, 5-star matches, 5-star matches, banger, 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 because you can only go so far. We're human beings with human bodies. I mean, and I love having good wrestling. Don't get me wrong. I love having great wrestling on the program, but it is not the be all end all.
That was a great angle, and I think Okada's been awesome in his role. I think like it was a controversial decision to turn Okada heel and put him in that position, but I think it was absolutely the right decision. He's been great in it, and he's a linchpin to the elite right now. And Perry's going to be a big deal. And like I said, I think there's going to be some sort of takeover match where power is in balance. Wouldn't hate. Brought this up on the Fightful show. A commenter brought it up that I was on. Like, you got Double or Nothing coming up. Let Tony Khan put control of AEW on the line in some sort of a match, double or nothing. It makes so much sense. So if that's the route they go, or if there's a blood and guts match, or if there's a new authority figure, maybe it's Sting, maybe it's Kenny. I don't know what it's going to be. It's definitely an intriguing angle, and it's got you thinking what's going to happen next. So we'll find out, because this is a critical time for AEW. Lots of rumors right now going on about Warner Brothers Discovery and the NBA, and if that deal falls apart, what does that mean for AEW TV? So very important time for them to hit with some of this stuff going into the summer. So we will see what happens there. Any other thoughts on that before I move on?
No, I think we're good with that. One thing I want to go ahead and shout out, and I'll pivot to this too. If you're in the Albany area and you are listening to this between 6 and 9 a.m., you're one of the first people that like jumps on and checks out the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy every single Friday. That's great. We're going to be in your town. I just want to remind everyone that Under Siege, a pay-per-view event, the main event of it is going to be myself, Mike Bailey, and Trent the Seventh taking on the System. And it's my first step towards going after Moose and the TNA heavyweight, the TNA World Championship. And then the next night, there's also going to be a TV where I'm going to be wrestling there. I'm pretty positive, and I will definitely be interacting. So hope to see you guys in Albany this Friday live, and this Saturday as well.
Very excited for that. Should be a great show. And you know how much I love Mike Bailey. So you guys teaming together, that's cool. I'm very into that. I think that'll be great. On our episode today is going to be about Drew McIntyre. And there's a lot to talk about with Drew as far as he's concerned on the WWE front. Before we get into the Matt fact and stuff, two things I want to ask you about. Number one, we saw in NXT another QR code tease for what is inevitably going to be Uncle Howdy, Bo Dallas, whatever his name's going to be, and the new Wyatt family, the Wyatt Six, whatever that's going to be. And in this tease, it on multiple occasions brought up the word broken. As your friend Shane would say, what's up with that?
I did catch that. Interesting. Very, very interesting. I have a very long and storied history with Wyndham Rotunda, Bray Wyatt. So I think that's cool that the word broken somehow slipped in there. Who knows? Anything can happen in the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. So that was a very cool thing. And I do got to tell you, I love these vignettes, the Uncle Howdy stuff, and just the way, like, back to the White Rabbit, how it's like this bonus supplementary content that you can like check out, and like you're trying to figure out a mystery. And this is something else too. My wife, like, let me think how to phrase this the right way. So like being aware that these things were going to be happening, I smartened my wife up to them a little bit and showed her like the QR, and she watched it and she's like, oh my God, this is so cool. It's like trying to figure out a mystery, almost like an escape room. She's a big escape room mark, right? She loves those. So she's like, this is so cool. And she popped real big when she saw the one last night. So that was cool. How ironic that happened to air on NXT.
Interesting.
So yeah, that was I'm enjoying those things.
It mentioned We Are Family in there, so they're clearly leaning into the idea that other people will be involved. Is there anyone on the current roster you'd like to see in a new Wyatt Six or Wyatt Family faction?
Yeah, there might be a couple of people. There's a couple of people I would like to. There's specifically one I think that would need to be brought back into the mix. I think everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say that. But yeah, there's a couple of people I kind of have in mind.
Are you talking about Rowan?
Yeah, Rowan is the one I think would definitely. It'd be very beneficial to have him as part of the Wyatt Six.
Yeah.
So as far as the other folks go, I have thoughts on all those. I have a couple of people I'd like, and I just we'll see how this develops. It's going to be very interesting. It's a very fun time in pro wrestling.
Interesting. And the last thing I have on that front, we saw the WWE draft this past week, and nothing too crazy. Raw is stacked up. Raw is going to be the banger after banger after banger show. That's how that has been positioned. But you have any fun WWE draft stories you could share with us? Were you kayfabed at all during these drafts? How did that all work?
In the later years? Yes. The first time I remember them like kind of kayfabing hard was doing Taboo Tuesdays or Cyber Sunday. I think it was a Taboo Tuesday that we did, or a Cyber Sunday. I don't remember, but where it was a tag team match, and it was going to be me and whoever else was voted for was going to take on. I feel like it was Edge and Snitsky, and it ended up being me and Ray. But like we legit didn't know till 10 minutes before the match.
But like with the draft specifically, it's really hard because that changes your schedule if you get moved to a different show.
It does, and people would freak out about that. So I remember whenever I got drafted to ECW as the U.S. champion, that was a total surprise to me. I wasn't aware of that at all, and there was like probably a legitimate look of shock or whatever, where I didn't know that was happening, and they did a good job at like keeping people in the dark about that and trying to get like their legitimate reactions. And I think that's cool. The only thing that is possibly a drawback is that it could change their schedule, especially if someone has like a family and kids and
Right.
whatever, just so you can kind of play. And if people can kind of be smartened up on that and be okay with it, I'm all right with it. But I mean, if you're like a single dude just doing whatever and you're in the mix in your prime, like I say this all the time, like, man, I didn't watch TV. I didn't do anything. Those years when I worked with WWE from, 98 through 2010, like, dude, it was just go. Like, I missed so much great TV, and it's great. I got to go back and watch it later and whatnot. But like my life was just wrestling. I was like a single dude, just living the like making towns. The only thing that was real was the money and the miles. You know what I mean? That's like what my mindset was. And it was just go. I mean, if you're one of those guys, then, to hell with it, whatever schedule you're on, you're going to be busting your ass and working a lot. It is what it is. But yeah, man, it was, that's a pretty legitimate thing about that drive, the draft. They've always kept it pretty.
There's the famous clip of when JR and Michael Cole got switched, and Cole went to Raw and JR went to SmackDown, and JR had no idea that Vince was going to do that to him.
Right.
He even said when they were like going through production stuff the day before, I guess he made a comment of like, I'm very happy with where I am. I don't want to go anywhere. And then of course, Vince hearing that, there you go. Congrats, pal. You're on the other show now. And I'm sure that ruffled some feathers, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, there were obviously, especially someone like JR. Yeah, like I'm sure that did ruffle feathers. But welcome to pro wrestling. It's insane.
Yeah,
you have to be insane to be part of this, as it is.
It's almost like Vince did some things vindictively, but who could ever imagine stuff like that? That could never happen in the World Wrestling Federation.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. We are talking about Drew McIntyre on this week's episode. Before we can get to that, you know what I got to do. Please give us that Matt fact.
Matt fact. Matt has the system in his crosshairs.
You very much do. It's going to be a battle for the ages. I know you're pretty fond of those guys, though, as performers individually, the people in the system. Will that make it harder to delete them, or you can put those personal feelings aside?
Not when Damascus is behind the wheel. No, it won't.
True.
It'll it won't hamper me at all.
True.
When Broken Matt goes out, he becomes animalistic and primal. So no, he is ready to rock and roll with these people.
We know what happens with primal instincts. It's it's never a good thing on this podcast when you get into primal instincts. Matt, we are so fresh around the corner to summer. I know that is like your favorite time of the year. It's my favorite time of the year. You want to have things both ways. You want to be able to go out there, grill, eat whatever you want, but you want to look good at the same time. You want to feel good. You want to feel confident. And I can't think of any better way to do so than with our friends over at Mack Weldon. Mack Weldon makes timeless apparel with modern performance fabrics for guys who want to look and feel sharp without sacrificing comfort. From their light as air underwear to innovative anti-odor tees and versatile yet comfortable pants, Mack Weldon has a full range of clothes that never go out of style. I know that you've been rocking Mack Weldon at some signings lately, haven't you?
I have been, yeah. I rocked my Mack Weldon white shirt, and I love the fact it fit tight. It was light. It just was comfortable, and it made me feel confident, especially wearing white. I did a signing, and it was slated to be 5 hours. I ended up signing for 7.5 hours, and that shirt just was comfortable all the while through. And I felt like $1 million. I felt confident. I felt like people wanted to take their picture with me, not just because I was Matt Hardy, but because I looked good, because I felt good. And the confidence that Mac Weldon gave me wearing that shirt that day really helped me that autograph signing.
Ooh, I love to hear that, Matt. I love to hear that you felt super confident. I'm going to tell you this right here. I got this blue polo from Mac Weldon. It is a medium fit. I'm a medium polo. These are so damn comfortable. You said it too. It's a very unique material. Very unique material. It's like lightweight, but very aerodynamic as well, because I sweat like crazy. And it's nice to have something that I don't know about you if you've ever worn a polo. I know you're not a huge polo guy, but a lot of times polos can be very heavy, especially as the weather gets warmer. This is so lightweight. It almost reminds me like a golf polo, but it doesn't look anything like a golf polo. It is super, super chic. And I'm a huge, huge fan of this product. And I know you are as well. This is not just a typical podcast endorsement we're talking about here. Some guys want to look good without calling attention to themselves, and Mac Weldon apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. It's not really flashy like I was showing you. It's just classic in style, made from the world's most comfortable performance materials. And these clothes are designed to fit your style and the demands of modern life. They look like quote unquote regular clothes, but they feel like the latest in modern comfort technology. They're the go-to choice for guys who want to look great without even trying. I even wore Mac Weldon out on a date last night, and that's the truth. That's a shoot, brother. And guess how it went?
I bet it was wonderful.
That was exactly it. We're getting good at this. So I want to help you guys get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mac Weldon. Go to macweldon.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code HARDY. That's MACKWELDON.com. Promo code HARDY. And we thank Mac Weldon for sponsoring the extreme life of Matt Hardy. All right, let's get into Drew McIntyre. We're talking about Drew McIntyre because you and I were just on the phone shooting the shit the other day, and we were just talking about some of the stuff he's got going on. I'm like, man, covering Drew would be such a fantastic episode because I know he's someone, and maybe you can reveal a little more on this episode about your personal relationship with him, but professionally, you've faced Drew McIntyre quite a bit throughout the course of your career in multiple companies. And it's a really unique story because he's someone who came into WWE super young, all the promise in the world. It doesn't pan out. He goes away, shows his promise, and then gets the ball to run with it. And I think truthfully, finally, just in the last couple years, is finally getting his flowers for how good he is. He the first time you ever faced him, Matt, was October 6, 2009, right here in New Jersey at the Sovereign Bank Arena in Trenton, where I graduated high school, actually. And it was him and Kane on SmackDown defeating you and R-Truth in a tag match. When do you remember your first interaction with Drew being, and what were your initial first impressions of him?
Very nice guy, very respectful. He had a hell of a Scottish accent. I mean, it was harder to understand him than someone who's speaking Spanish when he first came to America, because, you know, like his Scottish accent was so thick and he would speak so fast. So can you say that again? And that has changed over time, but he's always been a great guy. Like we've been pals since day one. And I was the first person that was really chosen to work with him. And he was given a tough gig right from the jump. Vince, you know, coined him as the chosen one. So he had a pretty high expectation to live up to. So I was the one kind of entrusted in working with him first. But yeah, we had a great time, and I enjoyed working with him. And it was one of my first real experiences of like people having confidence in me to help build a younger talent and kind of get them ready to be a bigger deal and move up the card, and someone who was going to be a big player in the future. So it was cool. It was a good learning experience for me too while doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be stated. He was just 24 years old when he's on the main roster. He gets his call up there. And as you said, Vince McMahon declares him to be the chosen one. What intangibles did he have at the time that showed you he could be a major player in the future?
I mean, he was extremely athletic, as you can see. He's a tall guy. And back then he was so much thinner. He's like filled out his frame now. He's like a man. He's a full grown ass man. But he was a great athlete. He had a good look. He was very smart, and you could tell in his core that he was a big wrestling fan. I mean, he, admitted as we were working together, that he grew up being a huge fan of the Hardy Boys. He would cut out socks and put them on his arms, and he would do the guns ho, and they would fight on the trampoline, or they would do backyard wrestling, whatever it may be. So that was really cool too. And I think that made us bond even all the more, that I dig that stuff too, especially if someone like, grew up watching us and they emulated us just for a moment in time. It's so cool to get the opportunity to work with a guy like that. And then he had a great mind. He really absorbed information real good, and he just has it because he has like the timing, he has the ability, he has the knowledge. And sometimes the best wrestlers come from people that are truly pro wrestling fans, because if you're like this amazing athlete, you could have played in the NFL and you're like this amazing athlete, but if you've never given a shit about pro wrestling or been passionate about pro wrestling, you don't really like understand what it is in its core. You don't catch on as fast as someone who's been a lifelong fan. I mean, you can't substitute experience. And I think that even goes with watching the product and being familiar with the product and kind of seeing how the product works for all those years.
Yeah, I mean, there's that famous photo of him with the Stone Cold Steve Austin stuff all around his room as a kid. So he certainly did grow up a real legitimate fan. And I think you bring up a great point there. And that natural instinct, that sixth sense that someone has when they just have a basic understanding of the art that helps elevate them above other people. But getting that moniker of the chosen one, a future world champion, September 25th, 2009, Vince McMahon, he says he's a future world champion. They have an in-ring segment where he declares that. I can't think of anyone in WWE history who's ever gotten such an emphatic declaration of someone's ceiling. And it almost, to me at least, feels like a blessing and a curse. What do you think about that?
It is. I mean, it is a blessing and a curse, because once again, you're getting the rub from Vince McMahon. It's hard to ask for anything bigger than that right when you first step foot on WWE television. And then the curse part is you have these almost unrealistic expectations. And typically, and this is something I say a lot, like oftentimes unrealistic expectations are often met with disappointment to some degree, because if you expect this guy to be the chosen one, like he's going to have this, crazy ascension to the very top of the game and be the greatest guy to ever do it and blah, 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 blah. And if he doesn't go that exact route, then people look at him and they go, well, he was the chosen one. He's kind of a flop, kind of disappointing, even if he's doing good. So it's a really hard moniker and expectation to live up to.
And I don't think it was really ever reflective of his work per se. I always thought he was a really freaking good professional wrestler. But it's easy at that time. Like, go back to 09, 2010, 2011. Breaking through out of the mid card into the main event of WWE was a really difficult thing to do. Like, when it's great in the sense that you have a John Cena who is the franchise, as super dependable. John Cena main evented basically every single pay-per-view for a 5-6 year stretch, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's great to have that. But in turn, it can kind of be a challenge to elevate someone else to that next level when someone is taking up all that real estate. How do talent feel about circumstances like that?
I mean, it is tough, but I mean, this is, just hearing it from people around Vince, and even kind of hearing it from Vince a little bit in some of the times that I was able to work one-on-one with him. I mean, his goal, he wanted people to fight. He wanted people to fight for spots and fight on top. He thought that made them more, aggressive towards being better, like fight for the spot. And sometimes, there's even scenarios where he would almost pit people together just to like see who would be the strongest in that scenario. I think he lived by that motto of the strongest will survive. And if he had a guy like John Cena was a guy, he's like, cool, you put me on every show, I'll do every match you want. I'll stay on the road 365 days a year, regardless of how many appearances you give me. I'm cool. I'm open. Let's rock and roll. And that's just what Vince was looking for. Someone who was like, who was there living for WWE, to live the lifestyle of like a champion in the face of the company. I even think that's why Cody's going to do a great job right now too. I heard him say that he felt like he went backwards, that he backslid whenever he was at AEW, wrestling like once a week or whatever. He's glad that I just saw a recent interview where he said he's glad he wrestles more often now because it keeps the skills sharp. And I think he's like that. He's in that mentality of like, hey, I'm your champion. I want to be the face of the company. I'll do all the appearances you want. I'll wrestle on every show you got. Let's go. Let's go to work and let me represent WWE. And I think Cody has embraced that. And is it hard to get to that level? Yes, it is. It's also one of those things about you have to like have a certain mindset and you have to be very passionate and you have to be in a position where you can do that. I know Cody is in the position where he brings his wife and kid with him. They have a bus and live on it, whatever. It's just you have to mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually across the board. You have to be ready for that position because it is not easy because everything kind of reflects on you. If the company has a bad period, it's reflective on you. If the company has a good period, it's reflective on you. And you really are the face of the company. And for people to get to that point where Vince is willing to trust them in that spot or whatever else to put them in there and like put his faith in them, it is a very tough and challenging thing to get to. But he would really pit people against one another and he would want people to scrap it out to get to that spot. And he would see who is the hungriest and who wants it the more.
I guess again, like for me, it's just a matter of McIntyre has all the tools at this time. And look, he'll tell you that he might not have been ready at that juncture or whatever, but he gets that declaration. I just think Vince McMahon in this period of time, something Vince historically was pretty good at going back into the 80s and 90s, that he was not good at all in this era, 09, 10, 11, 12, was elevating guys to be in a position to become superstars, to become larger than life. And it's why he relied so heavily on the part-timers at this period of time, because WWE did a really poor job at building the next stars outside of John Cena. Essentially, everyone else was viewed at a less than tier. And I can only imagine how frustrating that must have been for some talent, because there was quality talent. There were really high ceiling performers in the company at the time, but you just knew that actually breaking through was going to be nearly impossible. Look, Punk only broke through by chance. Punk was not supposed to become tippy top main tier outselling John Cena merchandise guy, but he found something that struck and resonated, and all of a sudden that worked for him.
And I also think for Vince and company, I think it was a harder. I also think it was a challenge, more of a challenge for them than it was in the 90s and 80s, just because you have the internet is rising in prevalence. And like wrestling fans more than ever at this point are seeing like what these superstars are really like in their real life. And I think sometimes that would create conflict and pushes.
I'm going to push back on that because I
Okay,
disagree
push back,
on
please.
that. Yeah, I disagree on that because I think with the internet, you had a more, especially this time, you had a more direct voice where the fans are telling you, no, we really like Drew McIntyre. We really like Dolph Ziggler. We want to see these guys in these positions. We want to see them elevated to the main event, and we're going to get behind them. And that direct voice did not exist back in the 80s and 90s, whereas here it did. And think about how many guys could have been elevated to the main event level in this period of time, that including Drew McIntyre, that the fans, okay, they look at him, they're like, oh, he's got a lot of personality. He's a good pro wrestler. He's got a lot of the tools. Let's give him a shot. And Vince was so adamant in not letting those guys get to the next level. And I know you have a little bit of a different perspective on it, but I'm sitting here as someone who was a consumer of the product back then. I think there was a huge appetite for a lot of these guys to move on up. I don't think fans were as critical of them. I think maybe they were critical of Vlad Kozlov or, Del Rio coming in and just being thrown into the main event without any build, really. I think they were probably more critical of that stuff than anything.
I mean, the one thing I can say about if you go back to the 80s, when you see Hulk Hogan, all you know him as is as Hulk Hogan, the WWF champion. He's the guy who says his prayers, eats his vitamins. He's the guy who is this monster. If he gets hit with the finish, he makes this comeback and hulks up and beats the guy, and he's like the reigning champion, right? They never saw sides of Hulk where he was like exposed or where it was something different. It was always own brand as Hulk Hogan. And I think one of the problems that the internet added to it, but it was also beneficial. It was detrimental and beneficial because you do have people that can speak out and can say, this guy's this guy's that. But when you see people that post stuff or you see them living a life which is contradictory to the character they play on television, I think that is where some of the problems arose with getting people to the next level, just because we were just living in a different world and it was a transition and just wrestling had opened up, the curtain had been opened up, and it was like figuring out how to deal with that. Because I know there's tons of times where people were in angles, and one of the first examples that really stands out is when we had the thing with me and Edge whenever I came back, right? Because it was so realistic and everybody played to it so realistically, online and whatnot. Like, if there had been like, oh yeah, we're buddies or we're friends or everybody's getting along good, it wouldn't have quite as worked as well. And I think that was a real problem for people going forward. And like, they kind of had to figure out how to work things, to make a clear difference between like, this is the character and this is the person. We're going to focus on the character, or this is the character and this is the person. We're going to find a happy place midway between both and then run with that. I think that was very problematic. I know from living with it from 2000, 2010, there were a lot of times people would get upset at the office, or Vince would be upset because someone would post something or be seen in a video somewhere that was like contradictory to what their character was doing on TV. That's my point in this.
I don't know. I mean, I get what you're saying, but it still goes so far beyond that. I mean, the classic example is Wade Barrett, who Wade Barrett could have been elevated into a main event player coming out of that Nexus John Cena feud, and he wasn't. He wasn't, and I think it forever hampered him, and he never got to that next level because of that one feud. I really do believe that, and I think that was just Vince's unwillingness to give someone the ball to run with it. Where I think, thankfully, that has changed a lot in recent times. Where
right.
I think Paul Levesque's crew is a lot more willing to give some people opportunities to run with it and see how they do. And
I do agree with you. There were times where Vince was very hesitant to take someone and like push him to the next level. It is what it is, and you're not wrong in saying that. But yeah. I just wanted to give you my point of view about why sometimes it seemed harder for them to do that and strap the rocket on someone.
I get it. I mean, you've even talked about too, like where there were talks of you having a world title program. Like, sure, you had the ECW title run and that was great, but like, why not give Matt Hardy in 2007, 2008 a world heavyweight, a 2-month world heavyweight title reign and see what comes out of it, right? Give the opportunity, and maybe it gets over, maybe it doesn't, but it seemed like a lot of this didn't happen at the time, and it plays to my point here that Drew kind of gets lost in the oblivion.
Yeah.
And
we also know this. I mean, we have covered on here. We have chronicled the whole Jeff story. Jeff barely ended up getting that reign, but like looking back in the past, it was super historic and it really opened up doors for him. And he was like the most popular wrestler in the world there. There was a point in time where Jeff was, selling as much, if not more merch than John Cena. So yeah, I mean, there are times where you kind of have to roll the dice and take a chance,
Right.
That's what pro wrestling is. You have to take a chance every so often.
If it doesn't work, okay, you tried it for a month and a half, 2 months, and it didn't work. Move on, right? Like, that's it. Like, this stuff happens. It is what it is. So it was just very surprising at the time, to bring my point full circle here, that Drew didn't get that chance. And he kind of tailors away as a heel. I always joke with him. I was at a random Monday Night Raw taping in Bridgeport, Connecticut in September of 2012. He had been a heel his entire 3-year run. And on this taping, they tape a main event match. I think it was him and Jinder. And he comes out as a babyface with no build or anything. It's just a main event taping or Superstars or whatever it was. And he gets this huge babyface reaction. He's coming out, come on, baby, let's go. Like, it's like very babyfacey. I'm like, oh my God, that was awesome. And I was there in attendance. And then the very next week, they turned him heel and he was with 3MB. So I was telling him, I was like, I was there for Bridgeport, man. I was there that one night, your one babyface run. That lasted a week in WWE, because he stays a heel. And I thought that was a big mistake too, because he has so much charisma. And I think he could have been a really good babyface at that time. But instead, he gets put in 3MB, which is a comedy act. On one hand, Matt, the positioning certainly not favorable. Do you think he benefited in any way from being in 3MB with Heath Slater and Jinder Mahal?
I mean, the biggest benefit I can say that you're getting if you kind of have been slotted in a certain spot, which is pretty good, and then you get dropped down a little bit, I can say the biggest benefits you're getting from it is that you're still on TV, which is a positive, and that you're still making money.
Yeah,
Maybe it gave him an opportunity to work more on the entertainment aspect of the game. But once again, pro wrestling is very much one of those things where you have to take whatever you're given and you have to make the most of it.
sure.
That is your goal always.
Sure. And I know it was a difficult period of time for him. And that sucks to be put in that position. But he did, make the most of it. WLC for my money, Matt, is like the greatest gimmick match of all time. And so thank you for blazing trails that gave us WLC ultimately
Yeah.
between Hornswoggle and El Torito at Extreme Rules 2014. Drew McIntyre in that match. If you guys haven't seen it, Drew takes the most graceful tope through a table you're ever going to see. And it's fantastic. So he ends up getting cut at the end of 2014. And he decides, rather than to sulk in his misery, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to prove that I am capable of being this world title caliber performer. He goes straight to Evolve, starts putting on some bangers there. He's working across the indies, House of Hardcore. He's everywhere. And he eventually finds his way over into TNA as Drew Galloway. And all of a sudden, Matt Hardy, you're going to be in a position where you're going to be working with Drew quite a bit more here. What did you think about his presentation upon when he came into TNA?
I was very happy to see him, and I actually had worked with him. Also internationally, I did a tour of where I did a ITR with Kenny over in the UK, and we did a few dates where I did like a speaking show, sat down. It was almost feel like a little bit of a blueprint before we ever started the podcast, telling stories and talking about my perspective on certain things in pro wrestling. And I did some matches while I was over there too. Myself and my wife and Maxwell went, and actually got to work with him in the UK as well, which was great. And it was a blast. We did the whole thing where I came out and I was doing Broken, and well, this was later that I actually did that.
You also, by the way, going through your list, you actually had a last man standing match with him at WrestleCade.
I did,
in
yeah.
2014.
But this was after I was doing Broken Matt. I got to do some stuff with him as Broken Matt, and Rebby played the piano, and we got to do that over in the UK, which was a lot of fun. But I was very, very happy to see him come into Impact, and I knew he'd get a good opportunity there because he was a guy who'd had great TV time, and he legitimately was a guy that could be a great player, and he could be a very important part of any promotion that he was in. And it was cool because we kind of went into this weird deal where Jeff had been out hurt. This is once again, so many things happen because of Jeff's motorcycle accident where he broke his leg, right? Which actually leads to me getting broken because I just volunteered. I said, "Hey, John Gabrick," I said, "let me work with EC3." I said, I feel like I can make him. He's a young guy. I think he's doing great. I said, let me work with him a little bit. He can get a win or two over me. Hopefully elevate him a little bit, give him some credibility. And then as this started going on, Drew almost got inserted this deal as well. And then the next thing you know, we end up going to Bound for Glory, and you have EC3 versus Matt Hardy versus Drew, and Jeff Hardy is the special guest ref. But just the fact that I got to work with Drew already, in that mix for the world title, a program that was on top, was such a blast. And you could tell how hungry he was and how motivated and driven he is. And sometimes people are at their very best whenever they do that. A lot of times when people go through things that are embarrassing, or they're frustrated about whatever, that's when you see the finest part of a lot of guys, especially guys that are very motivated, that are very driven to be better, to prove people wrong, to defy the obvious, or defy critics, whatever it may be, whatever your motivation is. And he was very much in that mindset because he was busting his ass. He was working every weekend, doing 2 or 3 shots. He was booked all over the world, going nonstop. And I could tell at this point, I knew Drew would end back up in WWE, and he would end up being a serious player this time around because he was totally prepared for it. He had enough experience underneath his belt, and he had traveled the world, and he was motivated, and he kind of became a man over the course of these years. I feel like when he first came into WWE, he was younger, a young adult, more of a boy, and his maturity, both physically and mentally at this time, just like was through the roof by the time I interacted with him in TNA and we had that program for the TNA World Heavyweight title.
Because how much do you think him improving his physique changed his trajectory?
I mean, that helped a lot too. And that was also just time, that was also his body. I mean, he was just so young. I mean, like, you can't, like, if you're doing it legitimately, it takes a while. It takes years to like stack on muscle if you have a big frame
Right.
and whatnot. So, I mean, it took time, and he, felt like that first WWE run was cut short, and he didn't get the opportunities he necessarily wanted and whatnot. And he went out and he busted his ass and he made something happen. Oh,
We got
have a
Barty
Hardy
running. What's up, Barty?
Good.
Say hi, Barney. What
One
do you
day,
need?
Barty Hardy's going to be 6'5" and a total
Need this to be
beast.
put back on for some reason.
Oh my God! I'll tell you this: what Barty Hardy is going to be the most dangerous of all the Hardy kids. When
I
he
can
is,
beat up him.
you can beat up who? Me? Okay, you're too violent. You're quite hostile. You better be glad your mother's not looking. Here
He's
you go.
doing that jiu-jitsu gimmick.
He is doing the jiu-jitsu gimmick. What do you say?
Please.
And
Thank you.
there you go. All right, get out of here. See ya. Good run in.
So he's going to be the beast. He's going to beast of the Hardy kids.
Oh my God, he really is. He'll be the best swimmer too. There's a chance he might be the best athlete of all three of the boys. He's like freaky strong for 4 years old, and like the freaky swimmer for 4 years old too. Like, he was diving underneath and getting stuff. Our pool's not super deep. It's like 7.5 feet at its deepest. And he would dive down there and like grab things, and he would stay underwater like 20 seconds. He's
Oh my
4 years old.
goodness.
It's crazy. And he's like, I had to come home and get breath. Like, it's crazy. I mean, he's so far ahead of where everybody else was.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So yeah, Drew. It's funny about Drew. He's deceptively massive. Like, he's 6'5", 6'6", and when he was skinnier, you're like, okay, that's just like a tall pro wrestler. But when you bulk him up, I mean, he looks like a monster, just a total monster. And I feel like how he improved his physique and his look probably played, even the beard, right? Like, a small thing like that, growing the full beard, it just makes him look so much more menacing, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It really does. I mean, he's got a hell of a look now. He's got the beard, the menacing look. He has like this Greek godlike body. He's got the eyes. He's very good with his facials. So the stuff he's been doing recently has been so good.
How I always say, I always tell you how I think Wardlow is like AEW's James Bond. Drew McIntyre is WWE's James Bond, like through and through.
Okay.
He just he's so freaking cool in that sense. So yeah, I mean, your big thing with him, he cashes in his Feast or Fired briefcase on you to win the TNA World Championship on the March 15th episode of Impact. It's the first time that he wins the TNA World Championship. He's the first ever Scottish-born TNA World Champion. And to be a part of that moment, man, I'm sure it was very meaningful for him after being told no for so long and getting released. How much did that mean for you to be the one staring up at the lights for him and giving him that moment?
It was cool. I remember telling him that day, like I had been buzzed like a day or so before they were going to do it. And I told him that day, he said, oh, we're doing that. Oh, okay. I said, yes, just like I finally get away from EC3 and Jeff. I survived them in a 3-way, and then you come out and cash in on me, and you get your shit in, man, and you win the title. And he's like, oh, well, thank you so much for doing this honor. And then karma came a calling for him, many years later in the form of CM Punk. So there you have it.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that in just a second here. But so Drew works his way back to WWE. He gets an NXT run, which I thought the NXT run was really important for him to acclimate back into the WWE system. He gets hurt, but then instead of going back to NXT, he gets a call up to the main roster in 2019. And he goes on. The biggest shame of it all, Matt, and they kind of rectified it this year finally, but he got the massive babyface push at the beginning of 2020, wins the Royal Rumble, eliminates Brock Lesnar from the Royal Rumble, and it's going to be him versus Brock for the world title at WrestleMania in the main event.
Give that man the broken man pandemic treatment, damn it.
Yep, he certainly did. And he wins the world title in a audience-less WWE Performance Center. And he has a run with the title in front of no fans. And all that hard work that he put in to get that moment, having that robbed of him, it really sucked. And you felt for him. What were your thoughts on how all that played out?
I mean, it was just, I mean, what can you do? It was rotten. The pandemic was rotten across the board. As I say all the time, like, pro wrestling isn't pro wrestling without fans in attendance, without their oohs and their ahs and their cheers and their boos. And it sucks that Drew had busted his ass. He had traveled the world. He had hustled. He got himself over. He got himself into the best shape in every single way. Um, and then he got his big moment, his crowning achievement to win the world title. And then it happens at a pandemic, fanless arena. And it is what it is. All you can do at that point is just make the most of it and move on. But it did suck. And it was very unfortunate. And I'm so happy that he was able to get that moment this year in front of fans. And it's almost even more hilarious and entertaining. They ended up following up with the angle they did.
It's just so classic because, like, then the next year at Mania, WrestleMania 37 in Tampa, where it's the first event back with some fans, and he's facing Bobby Lashley, who's the champion coming into the match, with a chance to win the title back in front of fans. And they build the whole story around, okay, now he's getting his chance to do it. And in classic Vince McMahon fashion, can't give the fans what they want in that moment. And Bobby beats him. And everyone's like, this guy, this poor guy, he's never going to get the moment. And he, I think to a degree, Matt, his equity kind of fell a little bit because he just kind of kept losing. Like, he gets the Clash at the Castle main event against Roman Reigns. What happens? He loses. And eventually, through some smart, cohesive storytelling, he starts to have a little bit of a character change where he's playing this, like, tweener that he's clearly leaning into being a heel, but everything he's saying makes a lot of sense as an audience member. And it's a very unique character that he developed that he's still portraying a few months later now. What do you think of the current Drew McIntyre character before I get into the Punk stuff? Because I do want to pin you on that. But, like, how he's currently presented, where he's clearly a heel, but you listen to him and you're like, yeah, he makes a lot of sense with what he says.
I think it's been great. He's one of the more entertaining characters on WWE television. It's been so good. And the way he is even embraced, like, social media and trolling people, some of the stuff he did just to promote his quest to become the world champion, and also his obsession with Punk, which we can get into that in a little bit, right? But just, it was so good and it was so entertaining. And he's already got the rep that he's this big badass who is tough as nails in the ring, but now you're, like, getting this extra personality on top, like, oh my God, this guy's a real shit stirrer, and he's looking to, like, troll people or take digs or take shots, like, wow. And it was extremely entertaining. I think it's it's the most entertaining Drew McIntyre I've ever seen. So I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best characters we've seen in wrestling in a long time, honestly. I think it's that good. And at the Royal Rumble, there had always been some dissension with him and Punk as is, but at the Royal Rumble, he legitimately injures CM Punk. And they could have gone a few different routes with it, but immediately someone saw, okay, there's money to be made here.
Yeah.
And he starts trolling Punk over hurting him and taking away his WrestleMania moment. He makes the graphic with him pointing at the grave of Punk's WrestleMania dreams. And at WrestleMania, after months of trolling and going back and forth, and a great segment on Raw that we talked about here on this podcast about a month ago, McIntyre beats Seth Rollins clean in the middle of the ring to win the world title. He gets that WrestleMania moment in front of the fans. It's a clean win. He doesn't cheat. And you're like, okay, here's that moment for that guy. And CM Punk, who's on commentary, McIntyre goes over to him and he starts gloating and gloating and gloating. And you're just saying to yourself, oh man, you know what's coming. And with any good heel, Matt, he gets his comeuppance. Punk drops him. Damian Priest cashes in. And this is the opening angle of night 2 of WrestleMania, What do you think of how all that was executed and this imminent CM Punk match that will happen at some point?
I thought it was executed perfectly. I mean, the deal with Drew coming out and getting his moment, it was so great because, you know, the people who really did feel for him, you know, that he won the title in an empty arena during the pandemic, that he didn't win it from Bobby Lashley, that he didn't win it from Roman, you know, all those people got that moment to enjoy it for a few minutes. He was the champ for how long? 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, whatever.
Not very long.
He went over to his wife, friends, family, interacted with them, and was able to rub it in everybody's face for a minute or two. And then obviously his obsession with Punk, and that's something else we've talked about that was done really well, like an underlying weakness in his character. He was like so obsessed with Punk, and he was talking about other people being obsessed, and then the fact that he went over to him and he tried to gloat, he tried to rub it in his face that he's the world champion, and Punk's hurt and injured, done really well. He gets up on the table and Punk trips him, hits him with the brace. Like the stuff Punk has been doing in WWE has been great too. Hats off to him. His stuff has been really, really good. And just for him to do that, here comes Damian Priest. You elevate a young guy who is hot and like ready to be elevated. Once again, rolling the dice, taking a risk on him, and then just makes for a great story on top of that. And now you have Drew and Punk. You have something with Drew and Damian Priest down the road. It's just done really well across the board, and like everybody won in that situation.
Well, it's funny as they elevate a young guy. This goes to my point of like having to give people a chance. Priest is older than Drew McIntyre.
Yeah, and it's not.
But it goes to my point of like you got to give people chances sometimes, right?
Yes. A young guy in terms of WWE experience is what I mean. But you're right. Yes, he is older, but it's someone who's never been elevated to the top, who's never been a top tier champion, and for him to get that opportunity was great. And for some reason, I don't know who started that shit with the bisexual Undertaker, but that was crazy. That was like trending, with him. And I saw all kinds of memes and stuff. It was wild.
Yeah, no, but I mean, and McIntyre being in that position, he got all the way up for that choke slam, and it looked awesome. And Drew's a very giving guy. He is smart, and
he gets it. He gets it. If you get it, you are a giving guy. If you get it, then you're in there. You're in it for the greater good, and he gets it.
Right. And it's funny when Punk came in. I think everyone was excited to see the Seth Rollins match with Punk. Like that was the build, right? That's out the window. Like that's a match you could go back to at some point. Sure.
Yeah.
Whenever you do Punk and McIntyre, that's going to be a main event caliber match at SummerSlam, right? Like you could put that as a main event match at a major show, and with no titles on the line, it's just a personal grudge match, and that's going to be a big deal.
I mean, the entertainment that has been built between these two competitors is what is going to make this match. It's not having great matches on the road to this blow-off match. It is the entertainment factor between these two guys. Like Drew has been super entertaining. Punk has been super entertaining. And now there's a legit beef. There's something personal between these two, a rivalry. And that's once again what I dwell on. I say it ad nauseum. That's what's important to build issues in pro wrestling. At the end of the day, those issues are what make the most money. Because that match is something that people are going to be excited to pay for, either buy a ticket or watch on pay-per-view, whatever it may be. Like that entertainment and this personal strife and conflict between individuals, that is what makes people want to buy money to watch a pay-per-view or buy a ticket and be in the arena, whatever.
Well, and it's almost made you forget that Punk's even hurt in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, they've done a great job of keeping him relevant and present and current on TV.
Yeah. So I'm thoroughly enjoying Drew McIntyre now. I'm super glad that he's getting his flowers. He's being in this position that he's presented fantastically. And he's very good at being okay with making an ass out of himself. And that is, as a heel, like you've always said that too, like the heel has to be willing to get their comeuppance. They have to be willing to eat some shit. And I think Drew is really good at that.
Indeed. Yeah, you not only have to be able to relinquish the fear of being an asshole, you also have to relinquish the fear of looking stupid, because that comes with the territory when you're a heel.
Yeah, because that's what fans want to see. They want to see that moment. They're anticipating that, where the bad guy thinks they've got it all figured out, but the good guy one-ups them, and that's the beauty of storytelling. That's a fantastic part of it. Anything you'd like to say about Drew as we wrap up this conversation here? If he was hypothetically listening to this, that you'd want to say to him?
No, I've been buddies with Drew for a long time. We're in this one text group, still interact quite a bit. But just very happy for him. Very happy he's found the success, and very happy he's having a run at WWE and at such a high level right now. And just he's going to be able to parlay his dream of being a professional wrestler into a lifelong career. And for that, I give him big kudos, because that was my dream, and I'm very excited that I was able to do it. And he's going to be able to do it as well. So good on you, Drew. Good on you.
I'm a huge Drew McIntyre fan. I think he's one of the best professional wrestlers in the world right now. I think he might be the most complete pro wrestler in the industry right now. And I mean that from a character standpoint, a promo standpoint, a work rate standpoint. It's pretty hard to think of people who are more complete than Drew McIntyre in this current role is. So big shout out to Drew, and keep it up, and excited to see how that eventual Punk match gets pulled off, because I think it's going to be awesome whenever it does happen. And they're going to do Clash at the Castle again in Scotland. And imagine how incredible that's going to be for him to get a chance to have that match. I imagine that'll be very, very special. And he just, to cap it all off here, Matt, he just re-signed with WWE. The Rock delivered him a sword to honor the occasion. So he'll be there for a while to come. Good stuff, my friend. Good stuff. This will have already happened by the time this drops, but Matt and I are doing a lot on YouTube these days, and I want everyone to go over to Matt's YouTube and subscribe if you're not. Matt Hardy Brand, like you say, Wolfgang, like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. We're doing, as we tape this today, we're doing a live Ask Matt Anything, where if you got super chats, you'll send them in, you'll be able to get your question answered on air. It's going to be very, very cool. And I'm excited to do that. Anything you want to throw on that front in terms of what our plans are, Matt?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if you get a chance to cut this and throw it up before, as Wolfgang would say tonight, we are doing a live Interact with Matt, Ask Matt Anything. I'm just excited to get on here and chat with people, because we have had a great month. We've been growing, and we appreciate it. We appreciate all the people that tune in each and every single week to listen to the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy, listen to myself and John talk wrestling, top shot, talk life, whatever it may be. Tonight, we're doing a live Ask Matt, a live Interact with Matt. So whatever you want to get in, you put some comments. John's going to be reading with me. I'm going to be talking to you. I'm going to be saying your name. We'll talk wrestling. We'll talk life. We'll talk whatever. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification button on Matt Hardy, on Matt Hardy Brand YouTube, because we're going to be doing a lot more stuff going forward on YouTube. And tonight we're going to be live at 7 p.m. and we hope you are part of it.
Yeah, going to be super fun. And I know these podcasts, we usually try to keep them to about an hour 15. But we like to clip them up, and you guys get to see individual clips from it too. So make sure you're subscribed from that if you don't have all the time. And of course, leave us those 5-star reviews wherever you do get your podcast, because those certainly go a long way for us. We want to encourage you, head on over to advertisewithhardy.com, promote your business to the extreme, get it out in front of thousands of listeners every single week. Advertisewithhardy.com. Of course, check out adfreeshows.com as well for all the goods going on there, and savewithconrad.com. Oh, okay. All the plugs out of the way. Matt, anything else you'd like to say? I know you've got a special message for a special group of individuals who you'll be facing this week.
Yes. Tonight, Friday in Albany. System, I'm sorry. You have been marked for deletion, and very much sooner than later, you will be rendered obsolete.
Man. The words have been spoken. This has been the Extreme Life of Matt Hardy. We'll see you next time.
Die!
My skin's dying.